Alrighty, before we get started, I have a really quick thing that I want to show you guys, so bear with me.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Hey, don't be like that. I fooled you twice, so this time's on you. Now, for real, let's get to the video.
You'll never catch me, Krabs. Not when I shift into maximum overdrive. Hi-ya! I knew I should have gotten the turbo. Snot rocket!
Alright team, I've done the rounds online, and I can safely say the Sonic 3 trailer is a success. Now all we've got to do is wait for December 20th, and the holiday season shall be ours. That's great and all, boss, but Jerry, what is it this time? It's that I've also been doing some of the rounds online, and I've been seeing a bit of worrisome stuff for the holiday season. Take a look. No offense, Jerry, but wherever Warner Bros. Is putting out the same month as the Sonic movie probably isn't going to compare. We've already gotten 2-0. We even managed to beat out Sony in April as well. So I don't see what could possibly go wrong.
No, I had to say something! I had to say something!
Hello everyone, this is the Eliminator speaking, and yup, it's time for us to talk about yet another sequel today. Sonic the Hedgehog 2. As mentioned in my New Year's video, part of the plan I had for this year was to either talk about sequels to movies that I had covered last year, or to just talk about new movies entirely that I never got to cover, and Sonic 2 is on that list. And plus, with the third movie set to come out pretty soon, I figured now would be as good a time as any to get on with reviewing the sequel. So, like Sonic, let's stop wasting time and get straight to the video. Alright, I don't have much to say about the lead up to this movie, so let's get down to the characters. Now, before we begin, it's been brought to my attention that, despite me giving a spoiler warning in the story section, I often provide spoilers in the character sections of my videos. So, I'd like to say that this section contains spoilers, or at least more than the previous part. So, with that out of the way, let's begin, starting of course with Tom. Now, while Tom was basically the straight man in the first movie, he did have a smaller arc about wanting to feel valued, or feeling like he contributed something valuable, hence why he was planning to leave Green Hills and go to San Francisco. And near the end of the movie, he realizes that he's just as much valued in Green Hills as he would be in San Francisco, if not more. So it's not like they really had to give him anything new to do here, and I'm kind of glad they didn't, because otherwise it might have felt like they were walking back his arc. But at the same time, I feel like they give Tom next to nothing to do in this movie. Near the beginning, he chastises Sonic's carelessness when Sonic struggles to stop a crime on his own, and in doing so, he gives Sonic advice about being a hero, that you don't choose the moment to be the big savior, that moment chooses you. And then Tom goes off to Hawaii for his sister-in-law's wedding. Now, I know it's a bit early for me to start ranting like this, but I feel like I have a point to make, and I want to get it out of the way sooner rather than later. But believe it or not, I actually don't mind the human stuff in the Sonic movies. I know, I'm such a daring guy for saying that. But the reason I don't mind the human stuff in this first movie at least is due to the fact that it was always connected to Sonic in some way. For example, I mentioned earlier that Tom plans to leave Green Hills. Tom is the one human in Green Hills that Sonic idolizes the most. So imagine his reaction when he learns that the one guy he looks up to is leaving, especially since Sonic can't exactly go with him. It makes sense that Sonic would react the way he does. Anytime we cut back to a scene of Dr. Robotnik, it's always in relation to Sonic, as he's figuring out ways to track Sonic and Tom, and also figuring out how to utilize Sonic's powers for his own personal gain. Whenever we see the officials from the US government on screen, it's in relation to them trying to find Sonic, or get help finding Sonic, like how they hire Robotnik to do it, or how at the end of the movie, they give Tom a gift card to Olive Garden as an apology for roping him into everything. Meanwhile, in this movie, most of the stuff that the humans do, with the obvious exception, doesn't really matter and could have been cut out, as many people have already mentioned. And it isn't until Sonic literally comes crashing into that storyline that the humans are given some amount of relevance. And even then, it feels forced, as a way of justifying the fact that we watched all this other stuff. Like, it was never really set up earlier on that the fiancé of Tom's sister-in-law was an undercover agent trying to get closer to Sonic through his human connections. All of that happens in the scene where Sonic and Tails show up at the wedding. But then again, at the same time, if you cut all that stuff out, you wouldn't really have as much of a place for all the other human characters. And so it's basically a damned if you do, damned if you don't. So long story short, if you ask me what I would do instead of that,
I don't know. It's a good question.
so there. Although it isn't a total loss, as it means we get more scenes with Agent Stone, which is always a delight. I love how his introduction is him literally crying about the fact that Robotnik has been gone. And of course, we can't forget the true unsung hero of these movies, Tom's partner, Wade. Like seriously, out of all the human characters who aren't Robotnik, Wade is probably the most well-prepared character in these movies. In both instances where he's forced to interact with the villains, he always comes in with some kind of weapon. Like, it's no wonder this guy got a spin-off series on Paramount Plus. But I'm getting off topic. So, with all the human characters out of the way, let's see how the Sonic characters fare in this movie. Alright, now that we've gotten the shell off this shrimp, we can finally get into the meat of things, starting with Robotnik. Now, honestly, I don't have that much to say about him. Like the first movie, he's still a very over-the-top character who happens to make competent decisions. But other than that, nothing has really changed that's worth any note. I mean, aside from the fact that he's working with Knuckles, the Echidna, who is the movie's secondary antagonist. But again, it doesn't really say anything new about his character. Like, given what we know about Robotnik and just how little he values human life, it's pretty obvious to everyone that he's going to betray Knuckles at some point.
Can't believe it, I'm in disbelief.
But otherwise, Robotnik is an entertaining character, and so is Knuckles. Now, like Sonic, Knuckles has undergone a radical change in terms of his personality. Where most portrayals of Knuckles go for more of a hot-headed introvert type character, this version of Knuckles is kind of like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, where he has very much of a warrior's mindset, and doesn't have much of an understanding for technology or human culture, with that being where most of the humor comes from for him. But despite that, Knuckles is established as a credible antagonist, and I like how they clearly make him more of a serious threat compared to Robotnik. Something I especially love early on is how they call back to a scene from the first movie that seemed like it was just a sort of throwaway for the fans. That being Sonic's flashback to his youth. See, near the start of the movie, when Sonic is recounting how he got to Earth, something that he mentions is that he was supposed to keep his powers hidden throughout his life. However, he didn't. And one day, him and Longclaw were attacked by a random group, who, if you looked carefully, was actually a tribe of echidnas. Well, as it turns out, Knuckles was a part of that tribe, and given that he's currently all on his own, basically, where Robotnik is going after Sonic out of some form of petty revenge, Knuckles is fighting out of a misguided sense of honor towards his people, as due to Sonic's connections to Longclaw, he views taking him out as a way of getting some kind of closure. Though if you know anything about Knuckles, you'd know that his tribe weren't exactly the good guys in the situation, with them getting wiped out being a result of their own selfish lust for power. Honestly, I'd say this makes Knuckles' mission, as well as Dr. Eggman's betrayal and manipulation of him, all the more tragic, since it's clear that Knuckles genuinely thinks he's doing the right thing. Though it's not all doom and gloom, as after Sonic saves Knuckles, the two have a heart-to-heart, and later, with the help of Tails, go on to fight Eggman. And with that, I'd say we're finished with Knuckles, and the movie's antagonists as a whole. So, with that said, let's move on to the heroes of this story, starting with Tails. If you've seen the Venom video, you probably get this joke. But in all seriousness, Tails isn't a nothing character. The problem is that he's more of an expository character. Anything that the viewer doesn't know from Sonic lore or just in general, Tails is there to explain in perfect detail. As a result, he's basically that one Sonic fan who took their parents to see the movie, which would have been me had I seen these in theaters. But getting back on topic, this wouldn't be as much of a problem if Tails had more noteworthy traits, besides that and his intelligence. I mean, other than that, there's basically just the fact that he constantly glazes Sonic, which people definitely enjoyed the first time they did this with a character. Compare this to Tails' game counterpart, where, at the start, he was kinda timid because he was bullied for having two tails. But then, with Sonic's encouragement, Tails started to embrace his seeming imperfections. But the movie doesn't really do any of that, so it leads to Tails feeling like a flat character. And similar to what I said about Knuckles and Robotnik, Tails' presence does more to serve as Sonic, the character that he's paired with. Now, if you hadn't seen my video on the first movie already, I'd just like to say that I'm pretty mixed on this version of Sonic. On one hand, I'm interested in how they did things differently from the games, but on the other hand, I'm not a huge fan of them trying to have Sonic grow into his iconic version from the games. Especially since in this movie, Sonic doesn't seem to have changed too much from the first film. Similar to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, this is because it doesn't take place too long after the first movie, so not a lot is too different. However, like Guardians Volume 2, they still do interesting things with Sonic's character. Steve Reviews mentioned this in his review for Sonic 2, and I agree with him. Where the first movie had Sonic as sort of the funnier comic relief character, and Thomas the straight man, Sonic 2 tries to make Sonic the more mature member, guiding Tails as the two search for the Master Emerald. And honestly, I like this idea, since Sonic is trying to learn more about being responsible. As I said in the section on Tom chastises Sonic when he tries to stop a crime, but in doing so arguably causes more trouble than the actual criminals. So putting Sonic in charge of this younger, more vulnerable character helps to spearhead that moral. The best example of this being when Sonic and Tails have to escape from Knuckles and Robotnik's drones. And after losing the compass to the Master Emerald, Tails gets knocked out cold, and he stays unconscious for a good long while, to the point that Sonic has to go alone in order to face off against Knuckles. And what I like is that Sonic genuinely acknowledges that this is his mistake. Sonic doesn't just go alone because Tails is unconscious, he goes alone because he doesn't want to put Tails in any more risk, realizing that what Tom said is right. Not only that, but after Robotnik makes off with the Master Emerald, Sonic then proceeds to help Knuckles, the guy who'd basically been hunting him down with a vengeance, and then convinces him to join the good guy's side. Not only that, but then in the final showdown with Robotnik, Sonic is the one who formulates the plan to take him out by distracting him, so that the others can knock the emerald out of him, which allows Sonic to get his hands on it and transform into Super Sonic in order to finish the job, which is then capped off with Sonic admitting that, despite everything, he does still have some growing up to do. And with that, I'd say we've finished all of Sonic Movie 2's characters. So, let's move on to the story. Alrighty, you know the drill. Let's take a look at the story for Sonic 2. As always, spoilers for the movie. Though if you've made it this far, you've already seen it or you just don't care. So, let's begin. In Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Sonic is well adjusted to his life in Green Hills, now that everyone knows he exists. Wanting to make a positive impact in the world, Sonic basically tries to become a superhero fighting crime, though due to his own immaturity, things aren't really going the way he plans. Making matters worse is that Dr. Robotnik has now returned, with a new ally in the form of Knuckles, who also has a personal beef with Sonic. As if things couldn't get any worse, Robotnik catches wind of a mystical object known as the Master Emerald, which could potentially give the user ultimate power. And so, with the help of newcomer Tails, Sonic sets out on a globe-trotting adventure to get to the Master Emerald before Robotnik. If you remember my video on the first movie, you'll remember me saying that its biggest weakness wasn't that it used a lot of very cliche elements, but that it didn't really do anything interesting with them, unlike other installments in the Sonic franchise. And while that is true to some extent here, like again, the humans feel very disconnected from everything else that Sonic is doing, overall, I will say that this feels a lot more like a Sonic the Hedgehog movie. A good chunk of ideas used in the movie are pulled from some aspect of Sonic lore and are changed slightly to fit with the format. Like in the games, Sonic usually has to go to different worlds and areas to find each of the 7 Chaos Emeralds, whereas in the movie, it's the Master Emerald he's searching for. The Chaos Emeralds are simply housed inside it. Not only that, but rather than Knuckles being the guardian of the emerald, he is searching for it. Robotnik tricking Knuckles into helping him so that he can defeat Sonic and steal the Master Emerald in one go, as well as Knuckles joining Sonic and Tails after seeing his mistake, is something directly pulled from the plot of Sonic 3, just like a lot of the other Sonic elements in this movie. It kinda reminds me of those 2 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies from the mid-2010s. The first movie told a very basic story that didn't really feature much of the IP or any of its elements, save for the main characters, whereas the second movie really went head first into everything, almost to a point where it felt like overcompensation, like some of the stuff didn't actually need to be there. Meanwhile, with the Sonic movies, a lot of the fan servicey stuff feels like calculated decisions. It doesn't feel like a bunch of stuff was thrown in so that the audience could clap and cheer at it, and feels like it was actually picked due to its relevance to the story. Take the final act, which sees Sonic fighting against a giant mech. On one hand, it's clearly a reference to the final boss of Sonic 2, the video game, but on the other hand, it makes sense within the story. Dr. Eggman is juiced up on all the power from the Master Emerald, and so he uses it to manifest something he wouldn't have been able to build on his own. Not only that, but it's him learning from his mistakes in the first movie, because the last time he went to fight Sonic with his tech, it was woefully unprepared. Supersonic being used in the final fight isn't just a thing for all the fans to point out, but is also done because it's the only thing powerful enough to defeat Robotnik's mech, since it actually managed to overpower Sonic. Even Sonic's plane from the games is referenced, as it's the first thing that Sonic and Tails try to use to fight Eggman before being forced to fight on the ground. But other than that, the only thing I'd really say feels fan servicey is the post-credits reveal of Shadow, which is clearly done to set up the third movie. And veering away from fan service, I feel like some of the stuff could have been cut for time, like the dance fight at the Siberian Lodge, or the whole subplot with Tom's sister-in-law and her fiancé. But otherwise, I'd say that this movie is largely an improvement over the first. So, with that said, let's wrap up the video. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments section, what did you think of Sonic 2? Was it better or worse than the first movie? And why? Also, as a bonus question, what did you think of Sonic 3 if you've seen it? Please tell me without spoilers. As always, subscribe today to join the A-list and have a great day. Bye!